Today, some of our best segments from the global lane. From a sitting U.S. president to average Americans voicing their opinions about COVID-19 origins, masking, and vaccines. It seems if you share an opinion that doesn't support a progressive narrative, you'll be censored, maybe even banned from social media platforms. Our next guest suggests this dangerous trend is threatening the U.S. Constitution and the very fabric of the American Republic. Here to share his thoughts on the new censorship that is restricting free speech worldwide is former Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz is a constitutional law expert, civil libertarian, and free speech advocate. His latest book is The Case Against New Censorship. Professor Dershowitz, it's a pleasure, sir, to discuss this important issue with you. I know the Nazis burned books. Lenin, Stalin, and Mao silenced those who express views in opposition to their governments. Is this new censorship that you write about reminiscent of those one-party totalitarian states? How would you describe it?
Well, it has this in common. The people who burned the books in Nazi Germany were students. The people who advocated communism in Lenin and Stalin's Russia were students. The millennials today are on the forefront of censorship. They think they have the truth and they don't need dissent. They don't need due process. Why bother with dissenting views or free speech if they know what the truth is? If they know that every white cop who shoots a black person is, of course, guilty without regard to the facts of the law, if they know that every man who is accused by a woman, of course, is guilty. The woman is always going to tell the truth. You know, if they know that everybody who raises questions about an election are lying and making up facts, even if you disagree with them, why do you need free speech? So, yeah, I think, you know, we're not in Nazi Germany. We're not in Stalin's Russia, but we are getting close to situations where non-government officials, and that's what's so dangerous, non-government officials, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, are determining what we can hear, what we can say. You know, the First Amendment has two aspects, the right of the speaker to speak, but the right of the audience to listen. And we, the audience, are being deprived of free speech. Let me give you an example. Bobby Kennedy, the son of the former Attorney General and a great environmental lawyer, but he's a vaccine skeptic. I am more of a supporter of vaccination. We had a wonderful debate. It could have been held in any major university in the world, and it was on constitutional law, on medical considerations, on science, and hundreds, even thousands of people watched the debate and liked it, and then YouTube took it down. They said vaccination is not a debatable issue. We don't want to hear two sides of it, and we don't want our audience to hear two sides of it. So hundreds of thousands of people were denied the right to hear me and Bobby Kennedy debate this issue. I won the debate by default. I don't want to win the debate by default. I want to win the debate on the merits in the marketplace of ideas.
Big tech CEOs will deny they're censoring conservative speech or speech that doesn't quite fit their progressive narratives. But we've already seen how they blocked the New York Post story about Hunter Biden's laptop. That happened just prior to last fall's election. So that censorship decision may have influenced the outcome of the presidential vote. So how worrisome is that type of censorship influencing election outcomes by preventing all factual information from being made public?
It's very dangerous because it not only prevents that or has interference with that, but on so many other aspects of life, on whether to take a vaccination or not, on other issues. The head of the little town of Brooklyn Center said that he thought that the woman police officer who pulled out her gun instead of her taser and thought she was firing the taser, yelling taser, 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 when she was indicted for manslaughter, the town guy said she ought to be given due process, and he was immediately fired for calling for a constitutional right, due process for every citizen. You get fired, and there were threats, and if they didn't fire him, there would be all kinds of repercussions. That's the problem that's going on in America today.
You were a Harvard Law professor. What's happening in universities like Harvard, Yale, others that were once known as places of debate, discourse, and free speech? What's happening?
I'll give you an example. At Harvard, I have a colleague named Ron Sullivan, the first African-American ever made a dean of Harvard College. And he was a great dean. And then he made the, quote, mistake of defending Harvey Weinstein for about a month on constitutional issues. And the students in his college said they felt unsafe. They didn't feel unsafe when a year earlier he defended somebody accused of a double murder, but they felt unsafe because he was representing somebody who they didn't like and who had been accused of sexual misconduct. So he got fired by Harvard University for who he represented. If John Adams had been a professor at Harvard back in 1771, he'd have been fired, I guess, for representing the Boston Massacre soldiers. And Abraham Lincoln would have been fired because he represented some disreputable characters. And great people in America have represented awful people over time. And during McCarthyism, they got fired for it. And under the new McCarthyism, they're fired for it as well. So we have a violation of the First Amendment, of the Sixth Amendment, of the Fifth Amendment. Many of the millennials just don't care about the Constitution. They know the truth with a capital T. And why have dissent? Why have due process? Why bother with those cumbersome excesses when we know the truth and don't need to hear an opposing point of view?
I don't think they're taught the Constitution anymore. So is it too late to reverse this trend? What do we do about it? File lawsuits, regulate big tech? What?
First of all, it's not too late. We write books, as I do. We have talk shows like you do. And we try to appeal directly to the American public. Then we go to the Supreme Court. We have legislation which could restrict the ability of social media to take advantage of Section 230, which exempts them from lawsuits if they continue to censor speech. So a lot of things we can do. We haven't lost this battle, and it's part of a bigger war. And look, I lived through McCarthyism as a student in college. We overcame that. I think we'll overcome this.
Okay, it's just beginning, is it not? Professor Alan Dershowitz, constitutional law expert, author of the new book, The Case Against News Censorship. Thank you, Professor, for sharing your time and insights with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Race in America. More than 150 years after the Civil War, the people of the United States are still struggling to create a more perfect union with liberty and justice for all. And more than 50 years after the civil rights struggle, where racism and segregation were exposed for all the world to see, it seems politicians and media pundits give us a daily reminder of our racist past and present. So let's take some time to explore what is happening on the home front and to listen to various views. Joining us for the conversation are the hosts of the I Hear Ya podcast, Pastors Alex McFarland and Odell Cleveland. Both are also authors, professors, and speakers. Their goal is to end prejudice and racism in our society by listening and understanding differing views. Gentlemen, thank you both for taking the time for this discussion. Odell, I'd like to begin with you, because as a preteen, I participated in a civil rights march with my parents in Michigan. And I never thought then that more than 50 years later, we'd be struggling with race issues in our country. So haven't we come a long way since the 1960s? Why are we having this discussion today in 2021?
You know, first, thank you for having us on the show. And I think we definitely have come a long way since that time. But I think that last couple of years, we've taken some steps backwards. Racism is part of, America, but at the same time as Christians, I think that as we continue to talk to each other and talk about those things amongst each other that we talk about behind closed doors, a lot of times it's very awkward to talk about race. A lot of times it's not politically correct. And for the most part, we're just very cautious on what we say, how we say it. Do we call a black person African American? Do we call them black? Do we call them colored? What do we say? And if we say the wrong thing, is there any room for grace? Or is there any room to back up and get it right? Or just one word out of my mouth will I be labeled a racist? And I think that we use that term racist just far too frequently, because a lot of times we ask on our show, it's like, I'm questioning you, not like you're on the witness stand, but I'm questioning you for a better understanding, because in a lot of cases, we just don't understand each other. But what we found, though, is hard to hate up close. If you know someone and you're talking to them and trying to build a relationship, a genuine relationship, it's just hard to hate up close.
It's all about relationship, isn't it, gentlemen? Alex, why now? It seems we have daily reminders about race from our politicians, from mainstream media, on social media. Why do you think it's happening now?
I think a part of the reason that there's racism in America now is because we have lost our moral compass. From no-fault divorce to abortion to no legal protection for the unborn to now, transgenderism. I mean, to believe that that neighbor who's different from me is a human being made in the image of God, worthy of respect, value, dignity, worthy of my friendship and love. I mean, you really only get those values when you believe in morals and God. And morals and God have almost been erased from our public consciousness. That's, in my opinion, a large part of why racism still exists.
Well, then I've got to ask you both. I'm sure all races of people may have differing views on this, but do you think America is a racist society? If so, why?
I think that it's systemic racism in America. I think that America is the best country in the world. Capitalism is the best thing. And I think that in America, you could be anything you want to be. There's a lot of opportunities. Now, on the other side of it, because since mankind is not without sin, I see racism as a sin. The Bible talks a lot about you won't be able to make it without a spot or a wrinkle, but we see racism not a spot or wrinkle, but a stain. It's a stain on us, and how can we make it in heaven if we have a stain? Now, we have to be careful when we say, for every black person hate white people and every white person hate a black person. That's not true. It's a lot of genuine relationships out there, but it's a lot of when we don't understand each other, then we fill it in with, well, they must be a this or they must be a that. So to your point, America has systemic racism, but America is not a racist country per se, because I love America. A lot of people love America, and I wouldn't trade America for any other country in the world.
And I think most Americans would acknowledge the sin of slavery, but I must tell you, it's not unique to the USA. I've traveled to much of the world, and I even interviewed former slaves in Sudan. Arabs enslaved black Africans there. They're still doing it, and it's still happening today in many countries, and it's occurred since the dawn of humanity. I know St. Patrick was a Brit who was enslaved by other whites. They're Irish. Seems slavery has not been restricted to one people, group, or color, yet America's demonized. Might there be a bigger agenda here to divide our nation and people over race? What do you think, Alex?
I would say, to your point, that the left does have a vested interest in dividing America. And so what goes on in Washington and what goes on in the classrooms, that's in many ways removed from a lot of our lives. But what Odell and I are saying is that every last one of us can be intentional and proactive about making friendships with those around us. And, you know, when I first met Odell, his church, which is Mount Zion Baptist Church, which is probably the largest predominantly African-American church in North Carolina, one of the largest, and it's a great church, one of the largest, you know, predominantly black churches in the country, as far as I know. So even though I didn't know Odell personally prior to about 14 months ago, but I knew his church. So I knew if Odell came from Mount Zion Baptist Church, I knew he's going to be a good man, you know, because that's a great church. But nevertheless, while we have a lot of similarities, we are different in some ways. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. So I thought at the very least, we're going to have some interesting conversations. But we made a decision that we were going to be friends together. And it is becoming an incredibly rich friendship. We want to say to people, make friends with people that are different than you. But when you begin to grow friendships, you can't help but care about people. And when people care, good things happen.
Okay, gentlemen, when we return, we'll discuss what can be done to bring unity and racial reconciliation to America. And we'll take a look at what might be the most segregated place and day of the week in the United States when we come back.
Daddy?
Yeah, buddy?
How many nickels are in a dollar?
There are 20 nickels in a dollar.
How do birds fly? Does milk really make my bones stronger?
Yeah.
Daddy, when we die, will we go to heaven?
Do you have the answer to life's biggest question? Call the 700 Club. We'll help you find answers to the important questions life brings your way.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts, in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
More than 150 years after slavery, how can Americans bring about racial reconciliation? And how do we create a more just society for all races? President Biden and members of Congress support the formation of a commission that would explore reparations for American descendants of slaves. Evanston, Illinois has become the first city to offer reparations, a payment of $25,000 for those who qualify. Pastors Odell Cleveland and Alex McFarland are here to set us straight today. They host the I Hear Ya podcast. Gentlemen, what do you think of this idea of reparations for slave descendants? Would that help heal old wounds and move the country forward? What do you think, Odell?
Well, I'm all for reparations. However, I just think that it's more than just a check. I think it's something that we really need to think through and say, okay, what happened? because the first thing about reparation is what happened to even cause it. One of our discussions Alex and myself were having is like, Odell, I don't believe in reparations. I don't think I need, an example he used was, I shouldn't pay for a hamburger that I didn't eat. And I said, Alex, I understand from your perspective, but from my perspective as a descendant from slaves in Abbeville, South Carolina, a lot of our labor was stolen. A lot of our land in the agrarian South was stolen. A lot of ancestors got hung and killed and murdered. So we look at it somewhat different. A lot of the women who happened to be of African descent were raped, and our babies were taken from them and sold. So we look at it differently. So do I think that reparations just be a check? I think that's the worst thing can happen, a reparation just be a check. I think just like systemic racism, reparations is be something systemic, long-term, that's gonna benefit people. Because if you give someone a check who doesn't understand money, we all know in a capitalistic society, a year later, that person's gonna be broke. So I don't think that a check to individuals who qualify is the answer. I think we can be more creative. We're the richest country in the world. We're the most gifted country in the world. And as long as we continue to say, in God we trust, and believe in God, and don't step away from God, we'll be the most blessed country in the world.
So I've talked to people who say, hey, I had nothing to do with slavery. My ancestors didn't own slaves. Some said they had ancestors that actually fought or died in the Civil War to free blacks. So why should their tax dollars go to pay reparations?
This doesn't have anything to do with white people. The reparation here is America. If you look at America, the country we love, we're saying to America the same thing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said to America. You wrote a check, America, in the form of a dream that bounced. The check was returned insufficient funds. So this doesn't have anything to do with white people. The art against America.
You don't fix an injustice with a further injustice. And to pay money to people who never were slaves, extract money from people who never owned slaves, that's not just. And frankly, let me say, one of Odell's points that I do agree with, there are a lot of people that aren't prepared to handle a check, like in the case of the Northern City giving $25,000. I mean, there are a lot of people that $25,000 would actually be a cruelty to them because of what they would probably do to themselves with it. And one of the parts of America that was our founding principle of equality before God and equal rights, and we didn't live up to that. So I would argue we've already paid some reparations in the form of tens of thousands of soldiers and individuals whose blood was spilled in the Civil War, and all of the fighting and the investment to get the Emancipation Proclamation law, and then the equal rights, the civil rights movement of the 1960s and civil rights legislation. Now, here's my point, that we have given equality to all. Now, there are some echoes and some ripple effects of everything from Jim Crow to prejudice that needs to be gone. And I think only the Lord and good, consistent messaging can do that. I mean, this is a gesture that will, I assure you, it will cause more animus between the races. I didn't get enough, and then others will be resentful that their taxes have gone up to pay for it. Reparations, I think, will be disastrous for racial progress in America.
Okay, finally, I'm sure as pastors you too believe that if we are to overcome racism and prejudice, it must begin in our hearts, and our churches can take the lead. But churches and Sundays may be the most segregated places ever on every Sunday in America. So how do we overcome this and build relationships? Because that may be the key.
Well, you're right. And the fact that when it comes to Sunday 12 o'clock worship service, it is the most segregated time. And a lot of times when you look at, said, okay, how do churches integrate? A lot of times people don't want to integrate. The black church is one of the most precious jewels in the black community. And the reason why, historically, the black church was the place that people of color were in charge, one of the only places that we were in charge. and we were allowed to be in charge. So the Black church is the whole essence of the civil rights movement. And white people may be more comfortable in their culture and their setting, but it's going to be interesting that when we all get to heaven, though, I don't think it's going to be a Black church or a white church, and we're all going to have to be under that one God.
Amen. I'm sorry, gentlemen, we're out of time, but Alex McFarland, Odell Cleveland, your podcast is I Hear You. Where can people listen and download it?
ihearyou.show.
Thank you, brothers. I appreciate you. Thanks for setting us straight today. God bless.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com to get your copy today.
At last fall's Values Voters Summit, then HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson told Tony Perkins that people are using race to create chaos to bring about change. Dr. Carson suggests it's easy to convince people that they are victims and that white people have created their problems.
Because of the color of your skin, you are guilty and you owe, and it's a bad combination, guilt and victimhood. And it creates incredibly bad policies.
So, folks, don't fall for the race baiting and manipulation. Yes, let's promote justice, but let's not allow America to be divided by skin color. We are a great melting pot, a nation of all colors and ethnic groups. And let's not forget what President Ronald Reagan told us. Blood that has soaked into the sands of a beach is all one color. And if we ever forget that we are one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under. Well, that's it today from the Global Lane. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, MeWe, Parler, and Twitter. And until next time, be blessed.